Picture this, an empty highway stretching under a blazing desert sun, a lone truck driver delivering her cargo without a care in the world until a ferocious biker gang roars onto the scene. Suddenly, the calm evening sky erupts into chaos. When Addison Malone, seemingly just a regular driver, unleashes astonishing Navy SEAL combat skills to face down a ruthless group called the Red Skulls. This is the moment everyone's been talking about, a blazing clash of wills fueled by adrenaline and mystery, all leading to a shocking turn of events no one could have predicted. Curious how it all ends? Make sure to listen to the entire story and discover every twist, every daring move Addison makes to protect innocent lives. And don't forget, if you love gripping adventures like this, subscribe to our channel and stay tuned for even more thrilling tales coming your way. Addison Malone gripped the steering wheel of her 18-wheeler, savoring the steady rumble of the diesel engine beneath her. She was deep into the Nevada desert on Highway 95, transporting construction materials for a scheduled delivery 2 states away. The horizon stretched out endlessly, bathed in evening gold, and the road ahead was vacant except for the occasional tumbleweed. Anyone passing her on the road would assume she was just another lone trucker hauling cargo across the country. They would have no idea that not so long ago, Addison had traveled with a far different purpose, one that involved secrecy, discipline, and peril at every turn. Before she found solace on the open roads, Addison's life had revolved around strict routines, intense physical training, and lethal expertise. She had served with distinction in the Navy SEALs, quietly making history as one of the few women to earn the Trident emblem. During her years of service, Addison participated in classified missions across the globe, navigating treacherous terrains and using skills that hardly seemed compatible with her current job behind the wheel of a massive freight truck. But she found unexpected comfort in this new, simpler life. Long stretches of road allowed her mind to wander, giving her a sense of peace and reflection. Although Addison rarely spoke about her past to anyone, there were subtle hints she couldn't entirely bury. The way she maintained perfect posture, even when tired, the alertness in her eyes that flicked to every reflection in her rearview mirrors, and the methodical way she inspected her rig at each gas stop, all were traces of her old, carefully honed habits. In quiet moments at truck stops, other drivers noticed how lightly she seemed to move, as though her muscles were coiled and prepared for any threat. Yet they chalked it up to some personal quirk and never dug too deep. Everyone in the trucking world had their secrets. As she glanced in her side mirror, the glow of setting sun caught the chrome fenders of several motorcycles in the distance. They rode in a tight group formation, engines growling as they advanced. At first, Addison thought nothing of it. Biker clubs roamed these highways all the time, but something about them stirred her instincts. Their formation was perfect, almost militaristic, and the pace they set was unusual for a simple joyride. From her vantage, she counted 5 riders. Each was dressed in a heavy leather jacket, but even from afar she could see the gleam of possible weapons strapped to their sides. A red skull patch was stitched onto every jacket, identifying them as part of a particular outlaw biker gang rumored to cause trouble along this stretch of highway. She remembered hearing stories about increased gang activity, targeting truckers, threats, robbery, vandalism. Addison felt her posture stiffen slightly, her focus honing in on the group's every movement. She wasn't looking for a fight, but if they planned on forcing one, they'd be in for a rude awakening. Unbeknownst to them, the solitary truck driver they might dismiss as an easy target had years of specialized training, backing every breath she took. Evening shadows stretched across the highway, and Addison kept a watchful eye on the bikers in her mirrors. The desert air was turning crisp, the sky now streaked with orange and purple. It was the kind of serene moment Addison usually cherished, a reminder of the tranquility she sought after her years in combat zones. But this was no time to admire the sky. The group of 5 motorcycles accelerated until they rode parallel to her rig. One biker gestured aggressively, telling her to pull over. A flicker of tension coursed through Addison's body, but she concealed it well. She tested the brakes, carefully slowing her massive truck without appearing fearful. Experience told her not to panic. She breathed steadily, letting her training guide her. If this gang truly wanted to threaten her, she needed to be strategic. In her military days, Addison had often been outnumbered and outgunned, relying on both cunning and skill to prevail. Now she was on a stretch of desert highway with minimal traffic, the bikers bearing down. Her vantage point behind the wheel was not ideal for a fistfight, but she knew how to improvise ahead. An old rundown diner blinked into view. A flickering neon sign read Dusty's Diner, a beacon in the desert twilight. It appeared open, though it was far from bustling. Only 2 trucks were parked out front, one apparently abandoned. Addison decided it might be wise to pull in there. At least there would be witnesses, maybe even a phone line to call for help if things got worse. Stepping on the gas a little, she guided her truck off the highway and into the dirt lot beside the diner. The bikers followed, engines roaring dust, kicking up around them. As she parked, Addison took a moment to steady herself, glancing around for any potential advantages. She spotted a pair of old gas pumps around the side, a flickering overhead light that might provide some visibility, and a small stand of scraggly desert shrubs. She also noted that inside the diner's windows, a handful of customers were eyeing the scene. A sense of dread momentarily clouded their faces as they recognized the biker gang's insignia. Clearly, these riders had built a reputation in the area. Addison hopped down from the cab and was immediately confronted by one of the bikers, a tall, wiry man with a snake tattoo around his neck. His eyes burned with arrogance as he sneered at her. "Hey, sweetheart," he drawled, leaning too close for comfort. "You took your sweet time pulling over. My crew doesn't appreciate waiting." She squared her shoulders, voice calm. "I don't appreciate threats on the highway," she said, simply noting the other bikers circling behind him. Four more men, all sporting the same red skull patch and exuding an air of lawless confidence. Addison's heart rate spiked, but she channeled it into focus. She had no interest in escalating the situation, but she wouldn't be intimidated either. If a confrontation was coming, it was better to face it on her terms. Inside Dusty's diner, curious faces peered through the smeared windows, some belonging to travelers who'd hoped for a peaceful dinner break. Addison could almost sense their fear from across the parking lot. She was outnumbered but not necessarily outmatched, though the bikers had no way of knowing that yet. One of the other gang members revved his engine obnoxiously, while another dismounted and stepped closer. Arms crossed over his chest, the tall leader, the one with the snake tattoo, pointed a gloved finger at Addison's truck. "We've been watching that rig. You're hauling some mighty valuable goods. Are you not cement mix, maybe? Or industrial piping? Could fetch a decent price." His grin was slick with cruel intent. "Don't worry, we ain't out to kill nobody, but we'll need you to cooperate." Addison's eyes flicked to the snake-tattooed man's belt, confirming the presence of a concealed firearm. She noted the positions of the other bikers, one by the truck's passenger door, two flanking the diner entrance, and another pacing behind her. They were positioning themselves to intimidate her from multiple angles. Despite the tension building in the air, Madison maintained a practiced calm. She had survived worse scenarios overseas, and if these bullies thought they could corner her, they were sorely mistaken. "Cooperate how?" Addison asked, feigning a hint of nervousness in her tone. She was fully aware of the psychological advantage they believed they held, and she had no qualms about letting them assume it. Their arrogance would be their downfall. "I don't have any money to give you." "Money ain't the only thing we want," the man sneered. "Information, maybe. Who's waiting on that cargo and how badly do they need it? We might even hijack your rig." He shrugged casually as though it were all just a game to him. Addison pretended to swallow hard. The flickering neon from Dusty's sign cast shifting shadows across the scene, amplifying the air of menace. She shot a quick glance at the diner's door, where two customers looked ready to intervene, but hesitated. Addison knew involving bystanders could be dangerous. If the gang was armed, a stray bullet could do tragic harm. Not wanting a shootout, Addison considered her options. She could try to reason with them, but bullies of this nature rarely listened. She could scare them off by revealing her true prowess, but that would mean risking a public display of violence. If it came to self-defense, she'd do what she had to. The key was controlling when and how the confrontation escalated. "All right," Addison said in a measured voice, carefully stepping backward until her heels almost touched the diner's porch step. "Let's discuss this inside, away from prying eyes. I'd rather not have an audience." She left the statement ambiguous. Maybe they'd interpret her as fearful of watchers, but in reality, she wanted to position herself near potential cover. If a fight broke out, she needed some advantage in the environment. The old instincts were kicking in each breath, preparing her for what might come next. Reluctantly, the gang followed Addison's lead, albeit with sneers that conveyed they still believed they had the upper hand. She stepped up onto the diner's porch, her boots scuffing against the weathered wood. The rickety screen door creaked as she pushed it open. The inside filled with a warm glow from outdated light fixtures. The sudden change from the desert's twilight to the diner's yellowish lighting made the bikers blink, and Addison used that instant to survey the area more thoroughly. A scattering of tables took up the main floor. A few booths lined the walls, and an old jukebox in the corner emitted a faint hum, Behind the counter, a wide-eyed waitress clutched a coffee pot, her knuckles white. A wiry cook peered through the serving hatch, brows furrowed in concern. The two customers who had been watching from the window had retreated to a corner booth looking uneasy. Clearly everyone in the place recognized the red skull patches and expected trouble. Snake Tattoo moved in close behind Addison, the rubber soles of his boots squeaking across the tiled floor. He waved off the waitress impatiently, and she scampered behind the counter, setting the coffee pot down with trembling hands. The rest of the gang filed in casually, resting their hands near their hips. Addison was keenly aware that each had a weapon within easy reach, knives, pistols, or possibly both. Her own sidearm was concealed in a lockbox beneath the truck's driver's seat, so if this came to blows, she'd rely on her hand-to-hand training. She chose a spot near the corner where the countertop angled, giving her a partial view of the front door and windows. Snake Tattoo shoved a chair aside and leaned onto the seat back, examining Addison with an unsettling leer. "So you want to talk business?" he asked. "Let's talk. We'll take your rig, deliver your cargo. Ourselves and your company can pay us a finder's fee. If you're lucky, we won't break your face in the process." One of the gang members snorted a laugh. Another smacked his gum, loudly smirking in Addison's direction. Their attention, while menacing, was also scattered. Addison sensed it. They were underestimating her, seeing only a lone trucker who happened to be female. She suppressed a wry smile. The advantage was hers if she timed it correctly. All those years of specialized training had prepared her to strike decisively when the moment was right. But Addison also had a moral code, one she'd held on to from her military days. She wasn't about to unleash violence that could harm innocent bystanders, especially not in a confined space like this diner. She had to maneuver them outside or into a less crowded spot. Her mind raced, searching for a ruse or a reason that would draw them out without provoking immediate aggression. Every second ticking by increased the risk that one of the bikers would become impatient or reckless. She clasped her hands in front of her, intentionally showing no threatening motion. "Let's be clear. You want to take my truck, hold it for ransom, and threaten me until I comply. That's your plan." Her voice was level but carried just a hint of challenge. "I'm no stranger to confrontation, but I'd rather we settle this without anyone getting hurt." At that, the gang members exchanged looks. Their leader's eyes narrowed, trying to decide if Addison was bluffing or simply naive. "We'll see about that," he sneered, the threat heavy in his tone. Outside, the wind picked up, whistling across the desert plains and rattling the diner's loose panes. Addison wondered if any passing driver might notice the row of bikes and sense trouble, perhaps calling the authorities, but traffic was scarce this time of night, and it could be hours before a patrol car came by. She realized she couldn't rely on external rescue. That left one option: she had to protect these people and herself using the skills she had never advertised since leaving the Navy. She scanned the room for an exit strategy, noticing a door marked restroom in the back and a narrow hallway that likely led to the kitchen and a rear exit. If she could coax the gang outside, maybe she could isolate them or break them up. For all her extensive training, she was still only one person. Confronting 5 armed bikers in a close-quarters brawl was far from ideal. Snake Tattoo clicked his tongue. "Time's up, driver. How about we step back outside? You pop the locks on your freight, and we'll take it from there." He stepped forward, looming over Addison. His breath reeked of stale cigarettes. "And if you want to keep breathing, you'll do as you're told." Addison nodded slowly, feigning resignation. "All right, fine." She locked eyes with the worried waitress, who looked on the verge of tears. Addison hoped the silent look she gave might ease the woman's fear, or at least signal that Addison had some kind of plan. "Move," Snake Tattoo snarled. One of his buddies jabbed a finger at the other customers, warning them to stay put. Chairs scraped the floor as Addison led the group toward the door. They stepped back onto the porch, the wooden boards creaking beneath their weight. The moment Addison's boots hit the ground, she felt the desert air fill her lungs, bringing with it a familiar clarity. Out here with more space, she had a better chance to maneuver. A swirl of dust blew across the biker's feet, and Addison paused at the bottom of the steps. "The trailer's locked. I'll need a key." She patted her jacket pocket for show. The key wasn't actually there, it was in the cab, but she wanted them fixated on her, not suspecting any hidden agendas. "Then get it!" Snake Tattoo growled. The rest of the gang approached, 3 on her left, 1 on her right, forming a loose half circle. Their formation reminded her of how she and her old unit would encircle a target, though their technique was far less disciplined. Still, it was clear they'd done this before, likely shaking down unsuspecting truckers who never stood a chance. Addison pretended to rummage in her pocket. "I'm trying to find it," she lied. She slid her right foot back, adopting now the subtle stance of a trained fighter, and exhaled slowly. The moment was almost upon her. In that fraction of a second, she felt time slow. Her old squad leader used to call it the SEAL sweet spot, where adrenaline and intense focus merged to create near-perfect clarity. Addison felt it coursing through her veins right now. In a flash of movement, Addison struck. Before the bikers could react, she stepped inside the half circle, redirecting their advantage. Her left hand shot out, grabbing the nearest biker's wrist as he reached for a knife and twisted sharply. The man yelped in pain. In one fluid motion, Addison pivoted and used the force of her turn to elbow him in the temple. He dropped to the ground, knife clattering against the porch. The others, taken aback by her sudden aggression, had a brief moment of shocked hesitation, just enough for Addison to capitalize on Snake Tattoo. Snarled and went for his gun, but Addison was already on the move. She lunged to the side, evading his line of fire, and delivered a precise kick to his hand. The gun flew from his grasp, skittering across the dirt. With a practiced fluidity, Addison spun again, using her momentum to land a sharp kick to Snake Tattoo's stomach. He stumbled backward, wheezing. The biker to her right let out a string of curses, swinging a chain he had tucked in his jacket. Addison ducked low, the chain whistling over her head. She came up from her crouch with a powerful uppercut that caught him under the chin, snapping his head back. The chain slipped from his fingers, rattling onto the ground next to the collapsed porch steps. The third and fourth gang members, now fully aware they weren't dealing with any ordinary trucker, tried to approach simultaneously to corner her. Addison knew she had to break their coordinated attempt. Quickly backpedaling toward the diner's wall, she forced them to compress their formation to chase after her. Just as they closed in, she feinted left, then abruptly dived right, slipping past them. Her elbow caught one man in the side of the head, sending him stumbling into his comrade. Snake Tattoo, regaining his breath, managed to retrieve his gun. Addison noted the glint of the weapon in her peripheral vision. Her adrenaline surged and she dropped into a low stance. She had to disarm him before he got off a shot. She lunged forward, grabbing his wrist with both hands. With a swift twist, she levered the gun from his fingers, while simultaneously driving her knee into his ribcage. He groaned, doubling over. Addison flung the gun out of reach toward the diner steps, far enough to ensure it wouldn't be easily retrieved. The gang members, who were still conscious, stared at Addison in disbelief. Here was a single woman, apparently just a truck driver, dispatching them with lethal grace and speed. The quiet hush that settled over the scene was palpable. Dust still lingered in the air, and the battered neon sign above the diner cast flickering shadows across the battered bikers. Addison's chest heaved with exertion, but her eyes remained steady, scanning for any further threat. The entire confrontation had lasted mere seconds, though. For everyone watching, it felt like an eternity. Inside the diner, faces were pressed against the window, mouths agape at the extraordinary display of combat skill. Addison breathed out, calming her pulse. This wasn't her first skirmish, and likely wouldn't be her last, but she'd hoped never to use these skills so openly again. Yet in this moment, protecting herself and the innocent people in the diner demanded she stand her ground. After the flurry of blows, 4 bikers were either sprawled on the ground or stumbling to regain their balance, while Snake Tattoo clutched his side and glowered at Addison. For a split second, their eyes locked, and she saw rage flare in his. He spat onto the dusty ground, wiping a trickle of blood from the corner of his mouth. Clearly, he wasn't ready to concede defeat. One of his men, a big burly guy, tried to lunge at Addison from behind. She felt the vibrations of his heavy footsteps just in time and whirled to face him, deflecting a meaty fist aimed at her head. She responded with a swift kick to the side of his knee, causing him to buckle. Another strike from her elbow sent him tumbling into the dirt, gasping for air. "You're gonna pay for that woman, Snake," Tattoo snarled, trying to mask his shock at her combat prowess with anger. He gestured to the one remaining ally still on his feet. They shuffled to flank Addison, attempting to corner her between them. She pivoted, refusing to let them trap her in a pincer. Still, Addison's breathing was heavier now, and a sheen of sweat glistened on her brow. She knew she had to end this soon. Prolonged brawls increased the likelihood of injuries or unpredictable turnabouts. Snake Tattoo glanced over at his pistol, lying near the porch steps, then back at Addison, gauging his chances. Addison caught that look, her voice cut through the tense silence, low and steady. "If you go for the gun, you won't like how this ends. You've seen what I'm capable of. Leave now and nobody else needs to get hurt." For a moment, he hesitated, weighing his next move. Adrenaline still coursed in Addison's veins. but she kept her stance poised, ready to counter any sudden aggression. The man standing beside Snake Tattoo looked at his fallen comrades, visibly shaken by how easily this lone trucker had dismantled them. Just then, the diner's door flew open. The waitress and cook emerged nervously, the cook holding a shotgun, though he seemed unsure of how to use it. The waitress's voice trembled, but she managed to shout, "We've called the sheriff. He'll be here soon." Addison felt a rush of relief, reinforcements, or at least the imminent arrival of law enforcement. She didn't necessarily want the police prying into her background, but having backup to deal with these outlaws was preferable to fighting them all alone. The battered bikers shared anxious looks, realizing the tide had turned against them. Snake Tattoo hissed through clenched teeth. "This ain't over." Before yanking one of his men off the ground, another scrambled to collect the others, still conscious, and they began a hasty retreat toward their motorcycles. Addison stepped forward, arms still raised to defend, but she didn't chase them. Keeping them from regrouping inside the diner was enough. The sheriff could handle the rest if they stuck around, grumbling, cursing, and nursing bruises. The bikers mounted their rides, the engines revved to life with a thunderous roar. In a cloud of desert dust, they peeled out of the parking lot, leaving Addison and the shell-shocked spectators behind. A tense hush fell over the scene as the roar of motorcycle engines faded into the distance. Addison stood there, heart thumping, watching the cloud of dust settle. She surveyed the battered porch where a discarded chain and a dropped gun glinted under the neon sign's sporadic flicker. The waitress and cook looked stunned, the shotgun still clutched in the cook's trembling hands. Addison slowly unclenched her fists, her muscles complaining from the sudden intensity of the fight. It had been a while since she'd engaged in hand-to-hand combat. Adrenaline still coursed through her body, but a wave of weariness and relief began to wash over her. Although she'd acted swiftly and decisively, she was grateful that the confrontation had ended without anyone seriously injured. At least none of the bystanders were hurt. The bikers would feel their bruises for days to come, but she doubted they'd risk returning tonight with the sheriff on his way. The truck driver exhaled slowly, stepping away from the diner's wall. The cook and waitress exchanged glances of awe and concern before the waitress cautiously approached her. That was incredible," the waitress stammered, unable to tear her eyes away from Addison's athletic form. "Are you all right?" Addison offered a reassuring smile, brushing dust off her jeans. "I'm fine, just a few bruises." She looked at the waitress's name tag, Sally. "I'm sorry for the trouble. They've been harassing people around here for a while, haven't they?" Sally nodded, finally lowering the shotgun. "I've heard stories they pass through town every few weeks, cause a ruckus, and scare off customers." Her gaze drifted to Addison's truck. "We've never seen anyone stand up to them like that," I thought. "Well, I thought they'd kill you." Addison's expression softened. She didn't want to show arrogance, but she also couldn't deny the reality of her capabilities. "I'm just glad nobody else got hurt." She turned to the cook, who was carefully setting the shotgun aside, his hands still trembling. "Thanks for trying to help. I appreciate it." The man shook his head, chuckling nervously. "No, thank you. You practically saved this place." He gestured toward the interior of the diner. "If you need anything, a meal, coffee, it's on the house." Addison hesitated, knowing she had a schedule to keep, but her adrenaline crash was kicking in, leaving her exhausted. She also figured sticking around briefly would let her explain the situation to the local sheriff when he arrived, ensuring no misunderstandings. "I'll take you up on that coffee," she said finally. "Thank you." As Addison followed them inside, the small group of remaining customers began to clap or voice their gratitude, albeit still a bit shaky from the ordeal. Addison simply nodded, feeling a mix of humility and mild embarrassment. She never wanted an audience for this side of her life. Stepping up to the counter, Addison sank onto a swivel stool. Sally poured her a steaming mug of coffee, her hands only slightly steadier than before. Did you learn that in the military or something?" Sally ventured timidly, curiosity dancing in her wide eyes. Addison paused, considering how much to reveal. "Something like that," she answered cryptically. She took a sip of the coffee, the bitterness settling her rattled nerves. Outside, the sound of sirens in the distance signaled the coming of law enforcement, and Addison braced herself for the inevitable questioning. The sheriff arrived 15 minutes later, leading a small convoy of 2 police cruisers that cast red and blue flashes across the desert floor. By then, Addison had finished half her coffee, mentally reviewing how much of her story to share. She was off the grid now, so to speak, living a low-profile life as a trucker. She'd never broken any laws, but her special operations background wasn't something she wanted plastered on any public record. Still, the sheriff's department needed an explanation for the brawl. Sheriff Rogers was a stocky man in his 50s, sporting a salt and pepper mustache that twitched when he spoke. He and two deputies strode into the diner, surveying the scene of toppled chairs and shaken customers. Without missing a beat, Rogers walked over to Addison, who was rising from the stool. "I'm told you had an altercation with a local biker gang," he said, voice gruff, but not unkind. "Care to tell me what happened?" Addison recounted the events plainly, how the bikers forced her off the road, followed her into the diner, demanded her truck's cargo, and escalated to threatening violence. The waitress and cook corroborated her account, adding enthusiastic details about Addison's quick, decisive response. The sheriff's eyebrows inched higher and higher as they described how one woman had effectively subdued multiple armed men. "You're telling me you took on the Red Skulls by yourself?" Sheriff Rogers asked incredulously. "They've been a thorn in this area's side for months, if not longer. State police have been trying to crack down on their smuggling routes. They're known for shaking down truckers." "Sure, but none of those truckers ever fought back like this." Addison shrugged, keeping her tone modest. "I didn't have much choice. They were about to hurt people." She left it at that, not detailing the martial training that made her so formidable. One of the deputies scratched his chin, staring at Addison with a mixture of admiration and caution. "Have you served in the military?" "Ms. Malone," she gave a non-committal nod. "I'm a veteran, yes. Prefer to keep the details private. I'm just a trucker now." Her voice conveyed that she didn't want to delve deeper. Her dog tags were tucked away in the glove compartment of her truck, hidden along with the memories she wasn't ready to share. Sheriff Rogers seemed content enough with that. He let out a sigh. "All right, we'll file a report. Since they fled, we'll be on the lookout for them. You've got some bruises, but it doesn't look like you're seriously injured. Do you need medical attention?" "I'll be fine," Addison replied, grimacing slightly as she flexed her shoulder. She'd likely have a nasty bruise there by morning. "I appreciate you coming out." Roger stepped aside to talk to the waitress and cook, getting their statements in detail. The whole process took about half an hour, and Addison spent most of it sipping her lukewarm coffee, scanning her phone for any sign the gang might circle back. So far there was nothing, just the peaceful hush of the desert night, with distant headlights occasionally zipping by on the highway. Finally the sheriff wrapped up. "You're free to go, Ms. Malone. Drive safe out there, and thank you. You might have saved lives tonight." Addison offered a small smile, thanked him, and left a generous tip for Sally. Despite the free coffee, she then stepped out into the cool desert air, the moon casting silver across her rig's chrome. It was time to get back on the road and hopefully outrun the memories of a confrontation she'd never asked for. Addison climbed back into the driver's seat, the familiar hum of her big rig offering a sense of calm she desperately needed. She rolled her shoulders, wincing at the twinge of pain from the scuffle. In the dim overhead cab light, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the side mirror. Dust on her cheek, a slight bruise blooming near her temple. With a sigh, she turned the key, and the engine roared to life, flooding the area with bright headlights. As she eased onto the highway, her mind replayed the night's events. The menacing glares of the biker gang, the adrenaline-charged fight, the stunned faces of the diner patrons. For so long, Addison had kept her skills under wraps, yearning for a peaceful existence, away from the constant tension of combat. Yet trouble had a way of finding her anyway. The open road, once a symbol of freedom, had just revealed how easily it could become a battleground. The highway stretched out dark and empty, save for the distant glow of a rest stop a few miles ahead. Addison decided to push forward for a while longer before parking for the night. Her company's dispatcher wasn't expecting the delivery for another day, and she had a small cushion of time. She planned to use it to put distance between herself and the Red Skulls' territory. If they had any inclination to seek revenge, she didn't want to make it easy for them. Yet she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that tonight's altercation wasn't the end. The gang had seen what she could do. If they were truly organized criminals, traffickers, smugglers, or something worse, they might see Addison as a threat needing elimination. The last thing she wanted was to be looking over her shoulder every mile, but years of training had taught her that vigilance saved lives. She'd be prepared for whatever came next. Gradually, the tension in her shoulders eased as she watched the headlights carve a path through the darkness. This was her domain now. The truck, the rolling asphalt, the sense of quiet purpose. In hauling goods across state lines, the desert nights had always been her favorite, tranquil and vast, giving her room to breathe. Part of her recalled the quiet nights on deployment too, the times after a mission when all was still, and she could look at the stars without the weight of conflict pressing on her. But those nights were rarely as safe as they seemed. After an hour, Addison pulled into a well-lit truck stop, a small oasis of neon signs and parked rigs. She found a space to park near the edge far enough to keep some privacy, but within sight of the cameras that dotted the area. She killed the engine and sat for a moment letting the silence wrap around her. In the berth behind the driver's seat, she had a modest sleeping area. Before climbing back there, she double-checked the locks and glanced around for any suspicious movement. Nothing stirred except a couple of weary travelers fueling up their RV. With a heavy sigh, Addison settled into the bunk, pulling a thin blanket over her legs. She stared at the cabin ceiling, thoughts drifting to her uncertain future. Even if she managed to avoid further trouble with the Red Skulls, she knew her quiet life might be threatened again either by them or by another group discovering what she was capable of. She was no longer just an anonymous truck driver. Tonight's events had made sure of that. Despite her concerns, she let her eyes slip shut, exhaustion claiming her. Tomorrow she'd keep moving forward. Her new mission was simple: survive, deliver her cargo, and stay under the radar. But as she drifted off, the echoes of the fight and the lingering memory of snake tattoos under harsh neon lights reminded her that the battlefield had a way of following her no matter how far she drove. From my perspective, Addison's story is a testament to the power of courage and the will to protect others. She set out on a routine haul only to confront a dangerous biker gang and shield an entire diner from disaster. Her unwavering commitment, rooted in her extraordinary Navy SEAL training, reminds us that true strength often lies beneath unassuming exteriors. Most importantly, it shows how resolve and kindness can triumph over intimidation. Now, as we wrap up this incredible journey, I invite you to reflect on Addison's valor and consider how everyday heroes might walk among us hidden behind ordinary jobs. What do you think of her decision to stand her ground, no matter the odds? Share your thoughts in the comments and let's keep the conversation going. If you've enjoyed this tale, remember to subscribe and stay engaged. Your feedback and support help us bring more powerful, uplifting stories to life.